Hi there, and welcome to Hyundai Power Products. My name is Adrian, and today we're going to look at the HYW3000P2 Pressure Washer. So I've laid the contents of the packaging out on the table so you can see exactly what you get. First of all, we have the main pressure washer unit itself with the engine and pump. Here we have the upper handle, a little bit of assembly, I shall go through that. The chemical pickup hose, we shall go through that. The main high pressure hose, again, we shall show you how to fit that. Here we have the user manuals. Now I do strongly recommend that you read these thoroughly before use. And included in this package is some of the fittings that you're going to need. And here we have the main pressure washer lance in its two pieces. Again, we shall show you how those are assembled. And that's the contents of your packaging. The first thing we're going to do is to fit the upper handles. And I'm going to remove these two white plastic covers here. I'll remove the little thumb wheels and the bolts from either side. So there's one on this side, nut and bolt, and another one on this side, a nut and bolt. I'll just place them down for a moment, and then we can simply fit the upper handles, line them up. That's the upper handles and lower handles assembled. Then putting the bolts from the inside out, one bolt and one nut. I'll tighten that one down firmly, do exactly the same on the opposite side. There we are, that's the upper handle fitted. Before I put oil and fuel in the unit, I'm just going to do this little demonstration. This is a chemical pickup hose. Now, should you wish to pick your detergent up directly from a bottle, you simply connect the hose on here, on the top of the pump, the one end, the open end, and this little filter can be dropped into your, for example, a 5-litre bottle of detergent. However, this unit does have, just spin it round for you, a built-in reservoir here for your detergent. If you're going to be using this reservoir, there is a connection with that hose to make, and I shall show you that now. So for the purposes of demonstration, I've flipped the machine over onto its side, and instead of putting this into a container, we can simply cut this off. It will pull off the end, but the pipe will swell slightly where it's fitted on this filter, so it won't be a neat fit on this barb here. So you can simply cut the end off and refit the barb onto the tank here. You can shorten the hose if you need to. So that's how to connect the soap reservoir to the pump. So let's move on to putting engine oil in the engine. Now it's vital that you do this before you even attempt to start the machine, as this machine is shipped to you with no engine oil in the engine. Okay, so I've removed the dipstick by turning it anti-clockwise, and you will see a cross-hatched area on the dipstick. But we're not going to rely on that. What we're going to do is to fill up this reservoir. I've got the machine on level ground, and I'm going to fill it up so that the oil comes to the weir point of the hole. I shall show you that in a moment, but let's talk about the engine oil. So the engine oil I'm going to use is this 4-stroke SAE 30 petrol engine oil. This is readily available from our parts department, and it's specially recommended for Hyundai Power Products. So I've got my jug here, and I've put 600 ml of engine oil in it as a starting point, and it's got a useful spout. So I'll just commence filling the engine with engine oil. I'll probably put about 300 ml in, and as you can see, the oil has come right up to the point where it's just about to overflow. In fact, it's just on the edge there. So that would be the correct amount of the engine oil. So having filled it up to that point, we can replace the dipstick and screw it back in clockwise. And there we are, making sure it's tight. That's the engine oil filled. You will see that there is another dipstick on the other side of the engine. Don't worry about this. This particular dipstick may be used when the same engine is used in a different application. So just make sure that this filler's tight, but this is the easier one to access for filling the engine oil. Let's move on to putting petrol in your pressure washer. The filler cap is here on the top of the engine. Simply turn it anti-clockwise and remove the cap. Now I'm going to use fresh unleaded petrol, no additives, no nothing, but it is fresh fuel. And I'm going to put, well, all I actually need at the moment is around a litre of fuel for the purposes of this demonstration. So never fuel in an enclosed area. Outside is best, away from sources of ignition, and never be tempted to refuel the machine when the engine is running, because should you spill some on the exhaust, you could cause a fire because the exhaust gets very hot. Okay, so I'm just going to line up the two lugs on the cap, on the two slots in the fuel tank, and turn it clockwise to replace the cap. So that's petrol in the fuel tank. So here in the manual bag are a few of the fittings you're going to need, the nozzles and one of the pipe connections. So we'll open this bag and get out this black pipe connection. So I've got this little adapter out, and this is for putting the quick release hose pipe connections for the water supply in. I can just screw that clockwise into the nut until it stops, and then tighten up the nut anti-clockwise, and that's the little quick release fitting fitted to the pressure washer pump. So also in the packet were these four varying shapes of nozzle that fit in the end of the lance. This black one is purely for detergent dispensing. So detergent will not come through from the reservoir or from your container unless you were using this black tip. It's a low pressure nozzle, and when using this it will draw the detergent through the filler line and through the system and out at the end of the lance. So that's the black tip. Then we have the white tip. The white tip will give you a 40-degree jet of water out of the end of the nozzle. The yellow one is a 15-degree, and the red one is the pinpoint tip, or a 0-degree, which will give you a very fine jet of water, ideal for removing graffiti off brickwork or very stubborn stains, that sort of thing, but a single point jet. So you've got 0 degrees, 15, 40, and the chemical jet, and they all sit here nicely in the handle. Let's assemble the two parts of the lance. So if I take the trigger unit here and the threaded portion of the lance, I can simply slide it on, keeping it straight over the little O-ring, and then rotate this clockwise from my direction, from my viewpoint, and tighten it up, and then finally pull the rubber boot back into position, and that's the two halves of the lance assembled. So to connect the high pressure hose to the lance, you will see the high pressure hose has exactly the same fittings on both ends. So it doesn't matter which end goes on the lance. Okay? So I can simply push the end of the hose up inside the lance. And again, if you're looking from the underside, tighten it up clockwise and firmly into place. So that's the hose fitted to the lance. Now we need to connect the hose to the pump. It's exactly the same method. This is the high pressure outlet of the pump here. I can simply push the hose into the high pressure outlet, and again, clockwise looking from this direction, tighten up the outer ring, and that's the hose fitted to the pump. So onto the little fitting that we fitted earlier, a little snap lock garden hose connector, and there we are, that's connected. And to release, off it comes. I'm sure you've all seen these before. Okay, so we're almost ready to try the pressure washer. Let us first have a look at the controls. So let's have a look at the trigger mechanism on the lance. The trigger is here, which releases water, lets water out, stops the water flow. It does have a little lock here, which you can put up to prevent you inadvertently pulling the trigger. So back down, unlocked, that up is locked. Okay, so that's the trigger assembly. So here on the side of the engine is the on-off switch. It does exactly what you'd expect. That would allow the engine to run. You could now start the machine. when you want to switch it off, that would turn it off. This engine does also have low oil protection system built in, so if you run low on engine oil, it will stop the engine. So just bear that in mind should your engine just for no reason stop and you've still got plenty of fuel. There is a chance that you may need to service the engine oil or top it up. So yeah, on, off. Again, next to the on-off switch on the front of the engine is the recoil itself. We shall go through that a little later. So this lever here is the accelerator or throttle for the engine. Fully to the left is flat out. Fully to the right would be tick over. This top lever is the choke. For a cold start you would need to turn the choke on. So that would be choke to the left. And the fuel tap is the bottom lever. So at the moment it's in the left position, which is off. That would turn the fuel on. So as we stand at the moment, we're set up for a cold start. We've got the throttle flat out, we've got the fuel on, and we've got the choke on as well. Once the engine starts, we would then turn the choke off. When storing or transporting your pressure washer, I strongly recommend that you turn the fuel tap to the off position. If you're going to use the detergent from the reservoir, the top simply pops off. You can fill here with detergent and pop the top back on, having piped it up as we showed earlier in this demonstration. For transport or storage of your pressure washer, you can see that we have these handy brackets here at the top and a pocket at the bottom to store the lamps. So you simply disconnect the hose and connect it all up onto these brackets, and it's in an ideal place for storage. So I'm going to move on to the starting and stopping procedures for your pressure washer. Now there are some very important points here and we shall go through them. So I've connected up the water supply, all the pipes are connected and I've turned it on. Now before I start the pressure washer, it's important to fill the complete system with water and not air. So I'm going to pull the trigger, just let it run for 10-15 seconds with water coming out, just to make sure that the water is completely through the system. So we've got water in the system. We'll turn the engine on, fuel is on, choke is on, and whilst pulling the trigger on the lance, we will pull start the engine. As you saw there, once I'd started it, I turned the choke off and then it runs normally. When you pull the trigger, the pump comes under load and it works and basically produces high pressure water jet. When you let go of the trigger, the pump unloads and recirculates that small bit of water around and around the pump. Now it is important that if you're not going to pull the trigger for some time, turn the engine off. Not only don't you want to waste fuel, but that small amount of water in the pump that recirculates round and round can get very hot because it's a water-cooled pump. And you've got one small amount of water going round and round and it will get hot over time. There is a thermal relief on the end of here, which if it does get that hot, it will actually allow a small amount of water out, and then when cold water comes in it will shut off. But don't get it that far, that will damage your pump. So when you're not using it, don't leave the engine running without the trigger pulled for long periods of time, not more than say 30 seconds or so. Turn the engine off if you're not going to be using it. So we may have a warm start scenario here now. So basically I would turn the engine on, fuel is still on, the throttle's still up. Maybe at this point I'd have a half choke, let's see, because it's not run for very long. Now again, very important, when you've finished with it, release the pressure, because there will be pressure in this pipe. So that's released the pressure now, and I would be able to turn off the water supply and disconnect all the fittings, but you must release the pressure from the system when you've stopped it. Well, I do hope you found this demonstration useful. For more information on this or any of our other products, visit www.hyundaipowerproducts.co.uk. I've been Adrian, this has been the HYW3000P2, and happy gardening.